alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello and welcome to Alive After Reading. I'm your host, Tim Niederreiter, and with me today is a returning guest to the podcast, creator Rich Davis. Welcome.
Hey, man, thanks for having me back. Glad to be here.
Well, it's good to have you, Rich. I think we might have some technical difficulties yet, but it's going to be okay. We'll sail right through it, or at least muddle through it. That's what I promise.
Yeah, man, we'll roll through it. No big deal.
Yeah, exactly. So, Rich, what have you been up to lately?
I have been writing, and more writing, and then working out some time to go to a convention just about every weekend. Well, that's been my my modus operandi for the last 6 months or so.
Cool. That's a lot of conventions. Yikes.
I have a ridiculous amount of Sky Miles now. Between all the conventions I did last year and all the conventions I've done this year, yeah, I have racked up those miles.
I bet. Yeah. So
But it's fun.
Go on.
It's what you got to do to get out there, and you got to get out there and meet the people who want to meet you. And I love the convention circuit because it gives me an opportunity to not only see the people who are already reading my book, but also meet a lot of other people and introduce them to Cult of Dracula and now Rise of Dracula, which is the sequel that just came out in stores just a few weeks ago. So yeah, I really enjoy the convention scene. It's very, very exhausting, but I can't complain because there are people out there that actually do real labor at their jobs. So, I'll let them complain and I'll just grin and bear it.
Yeah, I hear that. I mean, yeah, it's like, how hard can you actually work if you're an author or a creator or a comic book guy? Any of that stuff is like, it's just a dream compared to doing a normal job.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a lot of physical labor, of course.
Yes, you're not lifting things.
It is mentally exhausting, and it's emotionally exhausting too.
Mm-hmm.
I'm working on my script for Prometheus and Chains, which is my next book that'll come out early next year from Red 5 Comics. It's an adaptation of Frankenstein. Is a metaphor for the creature, or the creature is a metaphor for Victor's grief, and so it is. I mean, I've had times where I'm writing it and I'm literally thinking to myself, I've had to reach out to my therapist and say, Susie, I don't think I'm going to get through writing this script because I'm having to go places emotionally that are very difficult. And my background is as an actor. I was trained in the Uta Hagen School of Acting, which is very much about substituting your own experiences into your performance. And so I use that technique when I'm writing. I substitute experiences in my own life to help create the characters and the scenes that I'm writing. And again, it's not physically exhausting, but it is emotionally and mentally, it can be very, very difficult.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I didn't want to make it sound. I guess I did make it sound a little too light, but physically, like you said, you're not getting.
That's okay.
You're not getting muscular strain or anything from being a writer. That's not happening most of the time.
I'm not going to show up on dirty jobs,
Yeah, though, to be honest, I did get some pretty serious carpal tunnel back in 2019, 2018. And it took me a long time to work it off.
I understand that.
Yeah. Repetitive stress injuries, that's just that everyone's going to get those, almost regardless of what you're doing. But yeah, anyway. That's one of the reasons I think that's one of the reasons I kind of stopped typing. I didn't realize it was so painful, but then I'm like, I guess I'm just not going to do anything. So back then I didn't dictate, and I started dictating in 2019, and the rest is history. But what a mess! What a mess! Like, I mean, and since then I've learned a bunch of exercises that made the carpal tunnel a lot better.
That's
anyway,
cool.
Yeah, but that's very exciting. You know, I Frankenstein's one of my favorite pieces of classic literature, actually, and I read it a bunch of times back in college, so I'm pretty familiar with it. Yeah,
it's one of those iconic. It's one of those iconic novels. You know, especially I love the Penny Dreadful style, that Victorian era of horror. You know, I think that's really the birth of everything that we know and understand about horror today. You know, horror really took a turn during that period. You know, there's so much in the world going on, you know, with new technologies being introduced, you know, so it really changed the way that we consume horror. And so I love those characters. I mean, obviously my first book was an adaptation, a reimagining of Bram Stoker's Dracula. And now I'm doing Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. So I'm kind of pigeonholing myself as the Penny Dreadful horror guy, but you know what? I don't care. I love it. I love what I'm doing, and you know, readers are responding to it because the comics are selling out. You know, 12 issues into my Dracula book, all 12 sold out. Both graphic novels have sold out before they actually hit shelves. Rise of Dracula is the most recent, and it just came out a couple weeks ago, and it was actually oversold by Diamond. So some of the retailers didn't get their orders fulfilled, and so those retailers who didn't initially get their shipments, they'll get theirs, you know, in a week or two. But you know, that's a really cool feeling, you know, to have a book that's sold out so well. You know, the people that want it can't get it. It's pretty surreal, man.
Yeah, I mean, as annoying it is for those people, it's got to be pretty incredible for the publisher and for you. I mean, that's kind of a dream.
Yeah.
I mean, that's amazing. It's like, okay, so we can't make these fast enough. Is almost the impression you're getting here.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
That's beautiful.
Like, wow.
Yeah. And especially for dark, intense stories, that's pretty impressive.
I don't know when the 15 minutes is up, but yeah, you know, horror fans are great. Horror fans love what they love, and then they consume it, and they love it to death. You know, I mean, the horror fans they're the best in the world. They're so supportive. And you know, they really into the things they're into, like them better than comic book conventions, because you know, the horror people are, you know, they really get down with what I'm writing, and that's a good feeling.
Yeah, it kind of makes sense if I think about it, you know, if you think about it this way, it's like horror is like the genre, though some people have also called it a rhizome. So if you want to be an English major nerd about such things, you know, whatever. But as a category, though, horror is the type of story it is, and the comic is the comic book is the medium. So of course, comic book fans are more used to things like superheroes and other kinds of comics, though obviously there's a lot of variety. So I can see why a horror convention is like, oh, that's going to be more kind of focused on the sort of story you're telling there.
Right. Yeah, because when you go to a general comic convention, you know, there might be people who are into capes and tights, and people who are into fantasy, and people who are into sci-fi, and you know, comedy, and whatever. I mean, whatever you're into, I promise you, there is a comic book out there in the world made just for you that you will love and cherish forever. You just gotta. But when you go to a horror convention, people there, they love horror. Now you're just, you know, breaking into the subgenres. You know, do you like classic horror? Do you like slasher horror? Do you like gore porn? You know, what is your style of horror? But you know, they love horror, and most people who love any subgenre of horror are also going to love the broad genre of horror.
Yeah, absolutely. I really do appreciate horror lately. I've been really, like, I watched Ringu recently. That was awesome. And I keep talking about it on this podcast. I love that movie. And there are a few other ones. I keep
version. Holy cow.
Yes, that was really intense, but also weirdly kind of serene, because a lot of it is just like we're investigating this horrible thing, and there's scares, but it's a lot of it is just this kind of Call of Cthulhu, like as in the RPG, where we're investigating something. We're being very meticulous because we know there's something dangerous here. And we're in a hurry too, of course. There's a certain problem we have that involves someone trying to kill us at our time limit. Yeah. What do I mean trying? Anyway. So yeah. Anyway, so you've got these books out, and you've got the focus being very much that, like you said, the Penny Dreadful era, and I think that's actually really cool. It's also kind of a strong subgenre in horror right now. Even with that TV show there was on a while back, Penny Dreadful itself, the one with the very name of the genre.
I loved Penny Dreadful. The first 2 seasons of Penny Dreadful were some of the best horror television I've ever seen. And then season 3, they got completely fucked by the network. They canceled it filming season 3, so the creator he had always planned it to be 5 seasons, and so when they canceled it in the middle of season 3, he had to cram essentially 3 seasons into 1, and so that final season just kind of left on a down note, unfortunately.
It's too bad.
God, those first 2 seasons are incredible.
Yeah, and they got a spin off.
Inspiring to me as well.
Oh, were they?
Oh yeah, the City of Angels. It was good. They were definitely inspirations for me. Because they reimagined those classic things, and that's what I did with Cult, and then Rise of Dracula, and that's what I'm doing with Prometheus and Chains. I'm taking these very familiar characters, but I'm not telling a story set in Victorian London. There is nothing that I can do that would add anything to the mythos by setting another story in the Victorian era. But what I can do is I can take those same themes, and I can take those same characters and those same ideas and those same influences, and I can bring them to the modern world and stay true to what the author's original intentions were, but repackage it in a way that it's fresh and more relatable to a modern audience.
Yeah, that really rings very true to me with how the same way. It's a similar way to how I often approach a story too, where I'll take something that I really like or something that honestly I'm kind of down on to some extent. Like, they're a really good example of a book. I didn't end up publishing the novel I wrote from this because I was 17 when I started it, but there was this Neon Genesis Evangelion. Are you familiar with this? The anime?
Oh yeah. Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm,
so
absolutely.
I watched that when I was a teenager, like an older teenager, over the summer before my senior year of high school started. Mm-hmm. And I'd already written a few books at this point, so don't try this at home, unless maybe you've written a few books up to that point. But kids, try this at home. I'm going to endorse that right now, actually. And I'm like, okay, I'm a little disappointed by how this show ended. Maybe a lot disappointed by it, to be honest. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to do something like this with this, this, and this. But because, and maybe this is because my parents were both physics professors at some point. But I said, well, giant robots are kind of absurd. There are giant robots in Evangelion, if you haven't heard of it, anyway. And so giant robots are kind of crazy. Maybe we can make something a little more realistic, but still equally kind of crazy. Something a little different. So I went with shapeshifters, so they could create mass. So it's kind of so these kids who are like, instead of piloting a giant robot, would instead have this like power suit that creates matter around them, and so they can make different bodies basically that they control. It was pretty weird.
That's pretty awesome. Yeah.
And it was an insane sci-fi novel.
Weird is good.
Yeah. Maybe someday I'll go back to it because I really loved that concept. And it was all born out of the.
And if you've read anything
out of one little thing,
weird is weird.
Oh, absolutely. Weird is what's up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, man. If you're not going to be weird, what is it on Stranger Things where he says normal is boring or normal? What? Oh, I can't remember the quote. This season was the first season to me that felt like a real horror story. Before it was kind of a Spielberg-esque, kids, having fun growing up, and a little bit of dark mystery. It felt like R.L. Stein for the first couple seasons to me, and now God, this season they went full on into the whole that whole 80s slasher vibe. God, I loved this season. In fact, I'm wearing a Hellfire Club t-shirt right now.
Man, I need to get back to Stranger Things. To be honest, I actually have only seen the first season because I'm that behind on my TV. Yeah.
Oh my God, you gotta watch it. It's so good.
Yeah, there's so many things. I agree.
Duffer Brothers, God, they know what they're doing.
I loved the first season, so I can get back into it. I'll do it. But as I turn and look at all these books I have not yet read on my shelf, it's like, oh yeah, like I've got here Uzumaki, the Junji Ito collection. You familiar with this one, the manga?
Oh, Junji Ito is.
Oh God,
my God,
terrifying.
Junji Ito is terrifying.
Yeah, just the spine of this book is actually. Yes. I looked at it. I'm examining the spine of Uzumaki, the hardcover, and I'm like, wow, maybe I should read this. And like on the other hand, maybe I should wait till it's a little brighter outside. It's that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's I've had books like that, man. I did a couple years ago. Porn Shack Pikachu released a book called Infidel. It's a graphic novel out from Image Comics, and I made the mistake of reading that book in my office, which is downstairs in my house. It was like 2-3 in the morning because I couldn't sleep. And it's dark, and everybody in the house is asleep. It's quiet. My dogs are asleep. Everybody's just snoring away. And that book scared the shit out of me. I mean, it was terrifying to read at 3 in the morning.
Yeah, 3 a.m. is a scary time in the first place. It's the witching hour.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's perfect. The perfect time for horror.
But it's not. Mm-hmm.
Right before the sun can come up.
I pay homage to the witching hour.
No,
it's okay. I pay homage to the witching hour in Cult of Dracula. There's a scene where Mina, as a young child, she's awakened. She's staying in this like hotel room, and she's awakened by this creepy magic thing. And it's right when one of the shots is the little clock radio flipping over to the witching hour. And so, I love little Easter eggs like that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that sounds great. Do you do a lot of those filmic twists, those like little filmic gestures, where you have like a close-up, that kind of thing, that kind of scene setting? That I really love that in a lot of comics that I read. I mean, that's why one of my favorite manga of all time is Blame, by gosh, I forget his name. It's on the tip of my tongue. But anyway, Blame from the 90s. It's a cyberpunk manga. It's not really horror, but it's also not really cyberpunk, mind you. It's insane. It's one of the weirdest manga ever. And because the creator of the story, he was an architect or an architecture student, and it takes place all in this insane giant mega structure that is just constant. That you can see all different kinds of architecture and stuff. And like, he's just a geek for. Clearly, he liked his degree. Let me put it that way. Because this mangaka he's just like, no, we could have some pipes here, but no, we could also have a giant facade, some pipes, and a bottomless pit. Why not? Yeah, it's that kind of thing.
Yeah, my background is as a screenwriter. So yes, when I write my scripts, they do have a very cinematic feel. One of the first things I learned when I decided to become a comic book writer is that there is no set format for writing a comic book script. Like in the screenwriting world, they are very strict on the font you use, the type of spacing that you use, all this formatting crap that really doesn't matter. I mean, a good script is a good script, whether you use Times New Roman or Arial or whatever. So there's really no reason to be that way. And in the comic industry, it's not. I mean, there's just, you write your script in a way that communicates your ideas to your artist. And so when I write my scripts, my background being in screenwriting, my scripts do have a very cinematic feel to them. The way I set a page up, I open it up like with an establishing, page 1, 6 panels, exterior, Victor's laboratory, early morning. And then, I go in panel 1.1, this happens. Panel 1.2, this happens. So I'm writing it for my artist the same way I would write it for my director of photography. You have to write in pictures. So I have to communicate what I'm seeing in my mind to my artist so that he can then draw it. Whereas in the screenwriting world, you're writing for the DP, who then figures out how to set the shot up. And it's very similar. I found that writing this comic book is closer to writing a screenplay than it is to writing a novel.
That follows for me. I mean, that's one of the reasons I think I'd have a hard time writing a comic book or any kind of sequential art, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a totally different world. When you're writing a book, you tell, you explain the exposition. Whereas when you're writing a comic book, just like writing a screenplay, you don't tell, you show. You can't say, Victor experienced this while he was growing up and blah, 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 blah. You have to show, you take him back in a flashback and you show Victor growing up and getting the new little sister and, and all that stuff. So, it's completely different worlds.
Absolutely. Anyway, Rich, partially because of our technical difficulties, and partially because I'm out of time, I'm going to say it's been great having you. Where can people find your stuff, and what should they be on the lookout for in the future?
Yeah, you can find me on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all that stuff. It's Cult of Dracula Comic. So search for me there. You can also go to the worldofdracula.com website and check us out there. We love to hear from you. Social media is probably the best way to get a hold of me. And as far as what's coming out next, the second printing of The Rise of Dracula trade paperback will be back in stores in a couple weeks. You can order on Amazon, Target, Barnes & Noble. But first, try your local comic book shop. That's the best way to get any kind of comic. And then after that, I will have Prometheus in Chains, which is my Frankenstein adaptation, set in the post-World War II atomic age. And it will be coming out from Red 5 Comics in the first quarter of 2023.
Awesome. So, as you probably heard at the start of the show, people, at least if I remember to put the intro there, you remember the intro of this show is from the Frankenstein movie. It's alive. Anyway, so my atomic Frankensteins, have a good time, have a good week. I'll talk to you again soon. But also, if you really want more of me, you can check out my Patreon for some free podcasts every day, or at least nominally every day. It's called The Warm Up. I'm doing that now, where I just record my warm up before my dictation. And sometimes it's fiction, sometimes it's just random BS that I spit from my mouth. But it happens. It's out there. It's free. You can go check that out on the feed there. I think it's patreon.com/Tim Niederreiter. But don't quote me on that. Anyway, thanks for listening, everybody. Have a good one. And I will talk to you again soon.